Captain Alyssa Grant sat in the command chair of the Vanguard, eyes glued to the star maps flashing across her console. The hum of the ship's engines was almost soothing, a steady reminder that humanity had come so far in their quest for the stars. But today, something was different. It all started a week ago, when a cryptic signal was detected by Earth's deep space observatories. At first, it was dismissed as a glitch, a malfunction in a satellite, or some cosmic anomaly. But when the signal kept repeating at regular intervals and carried a faint pattern that resembled something deliberately structured, suspicion turned to fascination. A single line of code, buried deep in the signal, had been decoded. Help, coordinates, lost. It wasn't a simple distress call. It was a plea originating from a region of space no human vessel had ever ventured into, a place where the map stopped, where even the most advanced probes failed to return. The signal, weak as it was, seemed to echo through the fabric of the universe, like a cry from the void. Alyssa could feel the tension building in the room. Behind her, the senior officers were preparing for the mission briefing. They all knew what this meant. The coordinates were too precise to ignore, and the message was too desperate to dismiss. This was no accident. "Captain, we've got something." Lieutenant Ezra Park's voice cut through the silence as his fingers danced over the control panel, bringing up a holographic image of the signal source. Alyssa stood and stepped closer, eyes narrowing. The coordinates were real, mapped to a location far beyond any human settlement, beyond the galactic core. It was a remote region, where ancient stars burned out long ago, leaving only blackened remnants of cosmic history. No ship had ever dared to travel there, not even the most ambitious exploration missions. What could possibly be waiting at the edge of known space? "Prepare the crew," Alyssa said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of uncertainty. "We're going to find out." The rest of the briefing passed in a blur. Earth had been waiting for an excuse to push further into unexplored space, and this was it. A call for help from the farthest reaches of the galaxy wasn't something to ignore. But there was one catch. This was not going to be an ordinary mission. The Vanguard, Earth's most advanced ship, equipped with AI navigation systems, stealth technology, and advanced weaponry, was going to be flying blind. There were no guarantees. They were diving into the unknown, and no one knew what lay ahead. Alyssa's thoughts raced as she donned her uniform. Who had sent the signal? Was it a civilization lost to time, or something else entirely? Whoever had sent it had been gone for centuries, if not longer. The message was too old, too fragmented to offer any real answers. "I'm not going to lie to you all," she said to the crew as they assembled on the bridge. "This mission is risky. We don't know who or what we'll find out there, and we don't know what we're walking into. But one thing is certain, if we don't answer the call, who will? We're humanity's best hope for making contact with whatever is out there. We're not just explorers. We're the ones who stand between the unknown and the rest of the galaxy." The crew nodded, their faces reflecting the gravity of her words. There was no turning back. The coordinates were locked in, the engines powered up, and with a deep breath, Alyssa Grant gave the order that would change everything. "Engage at full speed. Set course for the unknown." The Vanguard shot forward, its engines lighting up the blackness of space like a beacon. Alyssa gazed at the starry expanse before them, her mind racing with possibilities. Whatever awaited them at the edge of the galaxy, one thing was certain. This would be the beginning of something far greater than any of them could imagine. And it would be up to them to answer the call. The Vanguard soared through the black void, its sleek hull cutting through space at faster-than-light speeds. Captain Alyssa Grant stood at the bridge's command console, staring at the swirling stars outside. The familiar, comforting hum of the ship's engines filled the air, but an undercurrent of tension hummed beneath it all. The further they went, the more the deep silence of the void pressed in on them. "We're approaching the coordinates, Captain," Lieutenant Ezra Park's voice broke through the quiet. Alyssa nodded, her eyes narrowing as the console before her blinked with the approaching location. Nothing on the radar. No anomalies, no signs of civilization. Just empty, dead space. For a moment, she felt a flicker of doubt. But then, the signal pulsed again. Faint, but undeniable. It was real, and they were getting closer. "Prepare to drop out of FTL," Alyssa ordered. "All hands, brace for deceleration." The ship's engines thrummed in protest as they powered down, the stars outside stretching back to their normal, familiar pinpricks of light. The shift in momentum was a sharp reminder of just how isolated they were now. No planets, no stations, just the vast emptiness of space, like an ocean of black ink. "Captain, something's wrong." Ensign Marlowe's voice cut through the growing unease. "We're not alone." Alyssa turned sharply toward her communications officer, who was staring at her console with a look of confusion. "There's no signal, Captain, but I'm picking up something." "A faint pulse, almost like a beacon," Marlowe continued, her voice tight with disbelief. "It's coming from ahead, just a few 100 kilometers." "Is it from the same source as the signal?" Alyssa asked, stepping closer. Marlowe nodded slowly. "Yes, but this one's different. It's older, not just the signal, but the technology behind it." Alyssa's mind raced. Older? How could something be older than the signal they had received, which had already been centuries in the making? It didn't make sense, but they had come too far to turn back now. "Full speed ahead, but keep your distance." "Let's see what we're dealing with," Alyssa said, her voice calm, but with an edge of determination. The crew obeyed without question, adjusting course and speeding toward the source of the pulse. As they neared, an enormous, silent object came into view. A derelict ship, drifting in the emptiness, its surface pocked and scarred by countless years of neglect. It was massive, easily twice the size of the Vanguard, and despite its decrepit appearance, there was an aura of ancient power about it. Alyssa's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just any abandoned ship, it was a relic of another time, perhaps even another civilization. "Ensign, can you get any readings on it?" Alyssa asked, her voice low. "I'm detecting a faint energy signature, Captain. It's not active in the traditional sense, but there's still power inside," Marlowe replied. "We're not alone, though. Sensors are picking up several unidentified ships in the distance. Their trajectory suggests they've been following us for some time." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. They weren't just investigating an abandoned ship. They were being hunted. "Captain, we need to be careful. Those ships could be hostile," Lieutenant Park said, his eyes flicking nervously to the readouts on his console. Alyssa's gaze hardened. "We're not turning back now. Prepare an away team. I want to know what's on that ship." With a quick nod from Park, the crew sprang into action. Moments later, Alyssa found herself at the head of a small team, suited in advanced spacesuits, preparing to board the derelict vessel. The airlock hissed as it sealed shut, and the gravity of the situation settled in. What they would find on that ship could be the key to unlocking the mystery of the signal, or it could be their undoing. As the Vanguard hovered nearby, ready to assist, Alyssa and her team stepped into the dark, empty expanse of the abandoned ship. The walls were eerily silent, coated in layers of dust and decay. But the faint pulse from the beacon was undeniable, drawing them deeper into the ship's bowels. A door ahead creaked open with a metallic groan. Alyssa's heart pounded in her chest. The moment they crossed the threshold, something shifted in the air. The ship seemed to stir to life, as if recognizing their presence. The floor beneath their feet vibrated slightly, and distant mechanical noises echoed from somewhere deep within. The team moved cautiously, each step bringing them closer to the source of the signal. But as they ventured deeper into the ship's heart, the sound of something else, something far more menacing, reached their ears: footsteps. It was not the team's, and they were not alone. The footsteps echoed through the derelict ship's hollow corridors, unsettling in their rhythm, steady, deliberate. The crew paused, their breath held, eyes scanning the dim, decaying surroundings. Alyssa's hand instinctively went to the sidearm strapped to her thigh, her fingers brushing the cold metal. The air was thick with tension, each of them aware that they had crossed into the unknown, and nothing could be taken for granted. "Stay alert," Alyssa murmured, her voice low but commanding. "We don't know who or what else might be here." The group moved cautiously down the darkened corridor, flashlights flickering over the walls, revealing strange markings etched into the metal. These weren't the familiar symbols of any human language. They were alien, intricate and flowing, like a script from a long-lost culture. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to speak, each of them aware that this ship had once belonged to someone, or something, other than humanity. The footsteps grew louder, now unmistakably coming from just ahead. Alyssa motioned for the team to halt. The corridor ahead curved sharply, obscuring their line of sight. She motioned for Lieutenant Park to move to the front. Park, a seasoned combat veteran, nodded and took the lead, moving swiftly but cautiously. The rest of the team followed, keeping close, their boots clattering against the metal floors, with the only sound besides the ominous footfalls. Then the source of the footsteps came into view. In the middle of the hallway stood a tall, thin figure, pale skin stretched tight across a gaunt face, its eyes glowing a faint, unnatural blue. It was humanoid but unmistakably alien, with elongated limbs and a posture that suggested grace, yet a certain rigidity that hinted at something mechanical in its nature. It didn't move. Alyssa's heart skipped a beat. The figure wasn't human, but it wasn't hostile either, at least not yet. It simply stood there, staring, as though waiting for something. "Whoa," Alyssa began, but her words caught in her throat. The figure didn't speak, but a voice, deep and resonant, as if it came from everywhere and nowhere, rippled through her mind. It was a language Alyssa couldn't comprehend, yet the words felt familiar. The syllables seemed to shift and twist in her mind, as if forming a message that was just out of reach. Suddenly, another pulse of energy surged from the depths of the ship, and the figure's eyes flickered brighter for a moment, before the voice grew more distinct, as if trying to connect with her. "You are the chosen. The signal, it was meant for you. You have come at the appointed time." Alyssa staggered back, her mind reeling. Chosen? For what? And why did the voice seem to recognize her, of all people? "Captain, what's happening?" Park's voice broke through her disorientation. He reached for his weapon, but Alyssa held up her hand to stop him. "Wait," she said, her mind working furiously. The figure hadn't attacked. Instead, it had communicated. But how and why? Was it part of the ship's system, or something else entirely? The figure's eyes fixed on Alyssa with a chilling certainty. It tilted its head slightly, as if studying her, before another surge of energy pulsed through the walls of the ship, and the faint hum of machinery that had been dormant for so long seemed to awaken. "The time of silence is over," the voice continued. "The beacon you follow is the last of our kind. You must listen, for your world is bound to ours. The path you seek is intertwined with the legacy of our fallen civilization. The answers you seek are here, hidden, waiting to be found." Alyssa's mind raced. The legacy of a fallen civilization? What had they left behind? And how did humanity fit into this grand design? Are you alive?" she asked, her voice shaky as the words tumbled from her lips. The figure tilted its head again, its glowing eyes narrowing as if considering her question. "We live as long as the stars burn," it said, its voice now laden with melancholy. "But in our dying, we have called to you. You will be the ones to carry the flame forward. You are the last hope, the bearers of the legacy that is both our salvation and our doom." Alyssa felt a shiver run down her spine. The message was clear, though its implications were anything but comforting. A legacy, one that could either save or doom humanity. She knew this wasn't a coincidence. Everything that had led them here, from the faint signal to this moment, had been pointing in one direction. The lost ancient race had reached out to humanity for a reason. And now it was up to them to unlock the truth, to understand why they had been chosen. "Captain, what now?" Park asked, his voice tense. Alyssa paused, her mind racing as the weight of the responsibility settled on her shoulders. The only answer she could give was a quiet command. "We move forward. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The silence in the derelict ship was almost oppressive, hanging heavy in the air like an unseen weight. Alyssa stood still, her mind racing with the implications of the mysterious figure's words. The crew had gathered around her, but none of them dared speak as they tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. The alien figure, alive, or perhaps more accurately, a remnant of a civilization lost to time, had shared cryptic warnings and prophecies. It had mentioned a legacy, a connection to Earth, and a grim fate that lay ahead. "We need to keep moving," Alyssa said at last, breaking the tense silence. Her voice was firm, but even she could hear the uncertainty that edged her words. "We need to find out more about this legacy, what it means for us." Lieutenant Park nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "Captain, the more I think about it, the more it feels like that thing was some kind of keeper, like a sentry or guardian. But guarding what?" "We'll find out," Alyssa said, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her chest. "Let's keep going." The team continued deeper into the ship, each step accompanied by the low hum of the dormant machinery coming back to life. The corridors seemed to stretch on forever, winding deeper into the heart of the massive vessel. Strange, alien symbols appeared more frequently on the walls, their elegant curves and spirals forming a language none of them could decipher. Yet the patterns felt familiar, as if they were designed to be understood, if only they had the key. The flickering lights overhead grew brighter as they moved, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. As they entered another chamber, the size of the room seemed to defy the limitations of the ship's exterior. It was a vast open space, lined with towering pillars of what looked like metal and crystal. In the center, a massive structure pulsed with faint energy. It resembled an obelisk, but its surface shimmered with a strange, almost liquid-like quality, as if it were alive. "Is that?" Park began, trailing off as he stepped closer, his voice filled with awe. "The beacon," Alyssa said softly, her eyes narrowing as she studied the object. The pulse of energy was unmistakable. The beacon from the signal. They had found it. As they moved closer, the air seemed to thrum with energy. The obelisk began to react to their presence, emitting a low hum, and a faint light began to glow from its core. Suddenly, the alien voice from earlier spoke again, this time much clearer, more insistent. "This is the heart of our legacy. The beacon you seek. It will show you the way, but be warned, the path is fraught with peril. The forces that would stop you from uncovering the truth are powerful and relentless. You're not the first to come here, and you will not be the last." The voice trailed off, and for a moment, the room was bathed in a heavy silence. Then, the obelisk began to project a series of holographic images, flickering scenes of an ancient world. Alyssa's breath caught in her throat as she saw an alien civilization, vast cities, towering spires reaching into a red sky, their inhabitants thriving in an age of unparalleled technology. But the images quickly turned darker. Fires raged, ships fell from the sky, and the world was consumed by an unstoppable force. The civilization was dying, its legacy being erased by something incomprehensible. "The fall," Park whispered, his voice filled with awe and horror. "That's their extinction." Alyssa's heart pounded as the images shifted once again. The beacon flickered, showing the same alien figure they had encountered earlier, but this time, the figure was standing in front of the obelisk, its eyes filled with sorrow and regret. "We failed. We thought our knowledge was enough. We thought our legacy would survive us. But in our arrogance, we created something we could not control. It tore us apart," the voice echoed. "The beacon was meant to guide the survivors, but only one remains." One who can learn, understand, and carry on our work. The choice is yours now. Alyssa's stomach twisted. The message was clear. The legacy was not just a gift, it was a burden. The civilization had failed, and humanity was now being thrust into a position of responsibility. "Captain," Marlowe said, her voice tight with concern. "We've been followed." Alyssa's blood ran cold. She turned to look at the crew, who were already moving toward the control panels, readying for anything. "We need to move." "Now," Alyssa said, her voice sharp with command. This could be what we've been waiting for, but we need to get to it first. We can't let anyone else claim it." As if on cue, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The walls shook violently, sending sparks cascading from the exposed wires. A deep guttural sound reverberated through the ship. Something was coming, something that had been awakened by their presence. The beacon's light flickered once more, then pulsed with a surge of energy that lit up the chamber like a flare. The doors to the room slammed shut, sealing them inside. Alyssa's voice was steady but filled with urgency as she barked orders. "Everyone, get to the control room. We're not leaving empty-handed." But as they moved toward the exit, the figure reappeared in the doorway, blocking their path. Its glowing eyes locked onto Alyssa's with a deep, sorrowful gaze. "The way forward is fraught with challenges," it said, its voice low and ominous. "But if you fail, you risk not just your world, but all worlds. The legacy you carry must be preserved, or all will be lost." Alyssa squared her shoulders, her mind made up. The task ahead was impossible, but there was no turning back. "We're ready," she said, her voice resolute. "Let's finish what we started." The doors to the chamber creaked as they slowly slid open, revealing the darkness beyond. The tremors had subsided, but the sense of imminent danger had not. Alyssa's heart raced as she led her team through the darkened corridors of the ship, the strange, alien energy from the beacon still pulsating in the background. The figure's ominous warning echoed in her mind, but there was no room for hesitation. They had come this far, and they would see it through to the end. "We need to get to the central command hub," Alyssa ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of the unknown pressing down on her shoulders. "If this place is going to fall apart, we need to control whatever systems we can before it's too late." Lieutenant Park led the way, his weapon at the ready as he scanned the hallway for threats. The rest of the crew followed close behind, eyes alert, hearts pounding in their chests. The ship felt like a maze, its narrow corridors twisting and turning with no discernible pattern. It was as though the walls themselves were alive, shifting, changing to disorient them. "We're not alone," Marlowe whispered, her eyes darting to the shadows. "Something's watching us." Alyssa could feel it too, the strange sense of being hunted, the prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Every creak of the ship, every distant thrum of energy, seemed to echo in the silence, amplified. But there was no time to stop and investigate. They had a purpose, and nothing would deter them. Finally, they arrived at the central command hub, an enormous chamber, its walls lined with technology that was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Holographic displays flickered in and out of existence, and alien symbols adorned every surface. At the center of the room stood a towering obelisk-like structure, similar to the one they had found earlier. But this one was different. It pulsed with a darker energy, and the air around it hummed with a low, ominous vibration. "This is it," Alyssa said, stepping forward cautiously. She felt a strange pull toward the obelisk, as if it were calling to her, urging her to approach. As she reached out, the room suddenly shifted. The air crackled, and a voice, gravelly and distorted, echoed through the chamber. "You have come too far." Alyssa froze. The voice was not the same as the one they had heard before. It was darker, corrupted, like the remnants of something that had once been alive, but had since decayed into something malevolent. "The legacy is not meant for you. You are unworthy. Turn back now, or you will suffer the same fate as those who came before you." The team tensed, their weapons drawn, but Alyssa raised her hand to stop them. She wasn't sure why, but she felt the need to confront this presence, this darkness that seemed to haunt the ship. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What happened to this place? What happened to your people?" The voice growled, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the very walls themselves. "I am the last of my kind. I was once a guardian, a protector, but I failed. I let them all die, and now I am bound to this place, a prisoner of my own creation. You think you can use the beacon? You think you can carry the legacy? You are not ready." Alyssa's heart pounded as the voice continued, a sense of foreboding growing stronger with every word. It spoke of failure, of a great catastrophe that had befallen this ancient civilization. It had been tasked with safeguarding their knowledge, their technology, but in the end, it had been corrupted, twisted into something darker. "The beacon is cursed," the voice hissed. "It will show you the truth, but it will also reveal the greatest lie." The air around them thickened, the temperature dropping as the shadows in the room seemed to deepen. Suddenly, the walls flickered, and the ground trembled once again. The alien symbols around the room shifted, rearranging themselves into a new pattern, a warning. "Captain," Park shouted, pointing to the floor. "The ship, it's moving." Alyssa spun around, her eyes widening as she realized the true danger. The ship wasn't just an ancient relic, it was alive, and it was about to launch them into the heart of whatever nightmare had consumed the civilization that once inhabited it. "We have to shut it down," Alyssa said, her voice barely audible over the growing hum of energy. "Find the control panel. Now." The crew scrambled, searching frantically for any signs of control. Marlowe raced to a nearby terminal, her fingers flying over the keys as she worked to decipher the alien code. But the room continued to warp, the symbols twisting into incomprehensible shapes, as if mocking their efforts. Alyssa moved toward the obelisk, feeling the darkness grow heavier. The voice had said the beacon was cursed, but that didn't matter. They had come too far to turn back now. They had to succeed, or Earth would be lost forever. "You have been warned," the voice echoed one last time, the words reverberating like a death knell. "Now face the trial, fail, and the legacy will be lost to you, and to all that follows." With a deep breath, Alyssa placed her hand on the pulsating surface of the obelisk. The ship's tremors intensified, and the light around her blazed into a blinding white. She could feel the ship's very essence reacting to her touch, testing her. And as the light enveloped her, she realized one undeniable truth. This was no longer just about finding answers. It was a test of humanity's survival. The trial had begun. Alyssa's vision blurred as the light from the obelisk surged around her, a blinding radiance that seemed to consume everything. Her body was weightless, suspended in the void between worlds, as if the very fabric of reality itself was unraveling. She heard the voices of her crew, Park, Marlowe, Lieutenant Rodriguez, calling out to her from a distant, unreachable place. But their voices sounded faint, distorted, as if the ship, the beacon, and everything in between had become a thin, fractured dream. Suddenly, the light faded, leaving her standing in a vast, desolate landscape. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and dry, stretching endlessly toward a horizon shrouded in thick, swirling clouds. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the sky above was an unsettling shade of red, tinged with unnatural energy. There were no stars, no sign of life, just endless emptiness. She turned in a slow circle, her breath coming in short gasps. This place, it felt like a memory, but it wasn't her memory. It was ancient, lost, as though the very landscape itself had been scared by an event long past. It was like standing on the ruins of a civilization that had died in a single catastrophic moment. A voice echoed in the air, deep and foreboding, yet oddly familiar. "You have arrived." Alyssa's heart skipped a beat. The voice again, it was the same one. The guardian, the one who had warned her about the cursed legacy. but there was something different about this time. This wasn't the same voice she had heard in the control room. This was the voice of someone, or something, that had lived through the disaster, that had seen the ruin of its people. She took a step forward, her legs heavy with uncertainty, and called out, "Where am I? What is this place?" The ground rumbled beneath her feet, and the voice replied, "You stand on the remains of my people's world. The trial begins here. The path you walk will determine whether you are worthy of the legacy." Alyssa's pulse quickened as she looked around, searching for any clue that might reveal the nature of the trial she was about to face. But the landscape was empty, barren. There were no landmarks, no paths, just the oppressive, endless void. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, fighting against the overwhelming sense of isolation. "Survive," the voice answered. "The path is treacherous. Only those who endure can understand the true meaning of the legacy. Only those who have the strength to bear it will be allowed to return." Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet cracked open, and a fissure appeared, swallowing the landscape into a yawning abyss. Alyssa stumbled back, her heart pounding. From the depths of the chasm, dark, twisting figures began to emerge, shadows that writhed and stretched, their forms constantly shifting, as if they were neither truly physical nor entirely intangible. They were the lost, creatures that had once been part of the civilization that had inhabited this world, but now twisted by the same darkness that had destroyed everything. They were not alive, not dead, but trapped in some eternal, tortured existence. One of the figures lunged toward her, its face a grotesque mask of anguish. Alyssa instinctively reached for her weapon, but it felt useless in her hands. The figure was upon her before she could even react, its ethereal form pushing her to the ground. But just as quickly, it was gone, vanishing into the air with an eerie screech. Alyssa gasped, struggling to catch her breath as her heart raced. The voice spoke again, its tone colder now. "This is the first trial. You will face your own worst fears. You will confront the darkness within yourself, and only by overcoming it will you continue on the path." Alyssa's head spun, and the shadows around her deepened, drawing closer with each passing second. The darkness was suffocating, pulling at her thoughts, her memories. She could feel the weight of every failure, every doubt, every moment of weakness she had ever experienced. The shadows twisted into images, visions of her crew, of the faces of those who had been lost before her mission, of Earth itself, dying in flames. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice breaking the silence. She clenched her fists, shaking off the weight of the oppressive images, the crushing sense of failure. She refused to let them control her. But the darkness only grew stronger. A shadow formed before her, solidifying into the shape of a figure. It was a version of herself, but twisted, her own face contorted into a cruel mockery, the eyes hollow, the smile wicked. "You think you're strong enough to save them," the figure sneered. "You're nothing. You're weak, just like the rest of them. You failed once, and you'll fail again." Alyssa's breath came in ragged gasps, but she stood her ground. "I will not fail. I'm not alone in this, and I will never stop fighting." With a defiant roar, she lunged forward, charging into the darkness that had formed around her. The twisted version of herself recoiled, dissolving into a cloud of vapor as Alyssa forced herself through the mental barrier, pushing back against the fear and doubt. The darkness began to retreat, its hold on her fading with each step. And as the figure dissolved, a new light began to shine in the distance, a soft, guiding glow. "You have passed the first trial," the voice intoned, now tinged with a faint hint of approval. "The path forward awaits, but more trials lie ahead. Only by facing them will you find what you seek." Alyssa breathed a sigh of relief as she steadied herself. The first trial had been brutal, but she had made it through. And though she knew the challenges would only grow harder from here, she felt a renewed sense of resolve. She was ready. No matter the trials, no matter the cost, she would see this mission through. The fate of Earth and the legacy of the lost civilization depended on it. Alyssa stood at the threshold of the next trial, the light from the distant glow calling to her, beckoning her forward. The oppressive darkness that had once surrounded her now seemed like a distant memory, fading with each step she took toward the light. But she knew better than to let her guard down. The trials were far from over, and whatever awaited her next would not be easy. As she approached the source of the light, the ground beneath her feet began to change. The cracked, desolate earth morphed into smooth, reflective surfaces, glimmering like glass. The air grew warmer, and the once scorched landscape shifted into something more familiar. It was as though she had crossed a threshold, moving from one world into another. The light now revealed its true source, a vast city towering above her like the remnants of a dream. The structures were alien, unlike anything she had seen before, but the symmetry, the elegance, was unmistakable. It was a city that had once been alive with activity, a civilization at the height of its power. But now it was abandoned, its streets empty, its towers silent. "This is," Alyssa whispered, her voice caught in her throat. "This is where it all began." The voice of the guardian echoed in her mind once again, resonating with an almost mournful tone. "This was my home, the city of the lost. Once a beacon of hope, now a tomb." Alyssa's heart sank as she took in the full extent of the devastation. The city had been ravaged, not by time, but by something far worse. It was as if the very life force of the place had been drained away, leaving only husks of its former grandeur. "What happened here?" Alyssa asked, stepping cautiously into the city's heart. The light around her flickered, and the atmosphere grew heavier, as if the very air was charged with sorrow. "We were betrayed," the voice responded, "by those we trusted, by those who sought to harness the power we had unlocked. They thought they could control it. But the power of the beacon is not to be controlled. It consumes, it destroys. And when they tried to wield it, they unleashed the darkness that wiped out everything." Alyssa's mind raced. The beacon, the source of all this destruction. She had thought of it as a tool, a means to guide them home, to bring an end to the uncertainty that had plagued Earth. But now she understood. It was far more than that. The beacon was a weapon, capable of corrupting, of destroying entire worlds. "I will not fail," Alyssa muttered to herself. She couldn't allow this fate to repeat itself. She couldn't let Earth suffer the same fate. As she ventured deeper into the city, a sound echoed through the empty streets, a faint whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Alyssa froze, her heart skipping a beat. It was the same voice, but this time it was accompanied by others, distant, hollow voices, calling to her, pleading for help. "We are the forgotten," one voice said, weak and distant. "We were once the protectors, the keepers of the legacy. Now we are lost." Alyssa's pulse quickened. She could feel their presence now, spirits, perhaps, or echoes of the city's inhabitants, trapped between this world and the next. They had failed in their mission, and now they wandered the ruins of their civilization, forever searching for a way to undo the damage. "You must stop the darkness," another voice urged. "Find the source before it consumes everything. You are the last hope." Alyssa swallowed hard, her mind spinning. The voices were desperate, but they were also warning her. The power of the beacon was not just a physical force, it was something more insidious, something that could twist and corrupt the minds of those who sought to control it. The lost civilization had once been its guardians, but in their attempt to wield it, they had destroyed themselves. Ahead of her, a towering structure loomed, its spire reaching into the sky like a final defiant gesture. It was the heart of the city, the place where the power of the beacon had originated, and it was from here, Alyssa realized, that the darkness had spread. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward the spire, determined to face whatever lay ahead. As she approached, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The entire city seemed to react to her presence, as if it were alive, awakening from a long slumber. The whispering voices grew louder, more urgent. "Do not enter," they cried in unison. "You do not know what lies within." Alyssa's heart raced as she reached the base of the spire. The doors to the structure stood open, as if inviting her in, but she knew better. This was no invitation. It was a test, a trial she had to face. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The interior of the spire was a cathedral of alien design, its walls adorned with strange symbols that pulsed with an eerie light. At the center of the room stood a massive crystal, its surface crackling with energy. The beacon, the source of the power, the heart of the legacy. Alyssa could feel the pull of it, the weight of its energy pressing against her chest. It was alive, and it was waiting for her. "You have come," the voice of the guardian whispered, its tone both warning and pleading. "But are you ready? Can you face the truth?" Alyssa clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. The truth didn't matter. Only one thing mattered now, stopping the darkness before it reached Earth. She approached the crystal, ready to face whatever awaited her, determined to end the cycle of destruction once and for all. The final trial had begun. Alyssa stood before the crystal, its glow pulsing with an ancient, almost sentient energy. The air around her crackled with power, and she could feel the hum of it in her bones, a deep, resonating vibration that seemed to reach into the very core of her being. This was the heart of the lost civilization, the source of the beacon's power, the thing that had brought both their greatest achievement and their utter destruction. The voices of the forgotten echoed in her mind once more, distant and pleading, urging her to turn away, to abandon the mission before it was too late. "You cannot control it. You do not understand what you are dealing with," they whispered in unison. "No one can." Alyssa's heart raced, her pulse quickening as she approached the crystal. She could feel the pull of its power, an intoxicating force, seductive in its promise. It was the very thing that had corrupted the lost civilization, turning their brilliance into madness. It had promised them mastery, control over the universe itself, but in the end, it had consumed them. The darkness had spread, and in its wake, there was nothing but ruin. But Alyssa knew what she had to do. She couldn't allow this power to escape again. Earth was depending on her. The future of humanity rested on her shoulders. The legacy of the lost civilization had to be stopped before it repeated the cycle of destruction. There was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, she reached out with trembling hands, her fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The instant her skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through her, sending a shockwave of raw power through her body. Her vision blurred, and the voices grew louder, more insistent. "You are too weak," they mocked. "You cannot control it. You will fail like the rest." Alyssa gritted her teeth, her mind reeling as the darkness tried to invade her thoughts. But she had come too far to be swayed by fear now. She clenched her fists and pushed forward, channeling every ounce of her will into resisting the pull of the crystal. "I am not you," she muttered under her breath. "I won't fail." Suddenly, the crystal pulsed brighter, a blinding flash of light erupting from its core. The ground beneath Alyssa's feet cracked open, and the air around her became thick with oppressive energy. Shadows swirled around her, their twisted forms reaching out with long, skeletal arms, trying to drag her into the abyss. The darkness was alive, a force that fed on doubt, on fear. It whispered promises of power, of untold knowledge, of the ability to shape the universe according to her will. But Alyssa fought against it with every fiber of her being, refusing to let the shadows consume her. "You are not strong enough," the darkness screeched, the voices rising to a deafening crescendo. "You cannot carry this burden." But Alyssa wasn't alone. She could feel the presence of her crew, of Earth itself, echoing in her mind. Their voices, too, were part of her now. She thought of Marlowe Park, Lieutenant Rodriguez, their sacrifices, their unwavering support. She thought of Earth's people, of humanity's resilience, of the hope that still burned within every human heart. In that moment, Alyssa realized the truth. The beacon wasn't just a source of power. It was a test, a trial to see if humanity was worthy of wielding it. The darkness had taken hold of the lost civilization because they had tried to control it, to use it for their own gain. But humanity had something they had never had: the strength to resist, to protect, to fight for something greater than themselves. With that realization, Alyssa closed her eyes and let go. She allowed the power of the beacon to flow through her, but instead of trying to control it, she embraced it, letting it fill her with purpose. She wasn't here to dominate this force. She was here to guide it, to set it on a path of healing, of redemption. The darkness recoiled, unable to penetrate her resolve. The crystal dimmed, its once overwhelming power now pulsing with a softer, more controlled light. The shadows dissipated, fading into nothingness as the power of the beacon was transformed. The voices of the lost began to fade, their mournful cries turning into whispers of gratitude. "You have done it," the voice of the guardian said, its tone now gentle. "You have broken the cycle. The beacon will not consume again. You are the first to truly understand its purpose. You have saved us all." Alyssa took a deep breath, her body trembling with the weight of the power she had just harnessed. She had done it. She had stopped the darkness, and she had set the beacon on a path to guide the lost home to their rightful place in the universe. As the crystal's light faded, the spire around her began to crumble, the once majestic structure now falling to ruin. The ground beneath her feet shifted, and she knew it was time to leave. She had completed her mission, but her journey was far from over. The city of the lost was silent now, its people freed from their eternal prison. The power of the beacon, once a force of destruction, now shone as a light of hope. Alyssa turned toward the exit, ready to return home, knowing that the beacon's legacy would live on, guiding humanity and the lost civilization alike toward a future where the darkness would never again have a chance to consume them. As she stepped into the light, the distant stars above Earth twinkled, a symbol of the new dawn that had been forged through her sacrifice. The forgotten had been remembered, and Earth had guided them home. And in the end, humanity had proven that, no matter the challenge, it could stand against the darkness and emerge victorious.